Okay, good morning, afternoon, evening. We'd like to have you with us today. Welcome to today's webinar on volunteer survey. My name is Sarah Hobbs, and I'm hosting today's webinar with my colleague Roger Parry. Thank you very much for presenting today, Roger. Just a few housekeeping points that we'd like to just make you aware of. You are muted, but we do also want to hear from you. So if there are any questions or any comments you have, please do use the chat function. There will also be a Q&A at the end. So we thank you for everyone who have submitted questions ahead of time on the sign-up form. But if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, please do add them into the Q&A as well. We also have a couple of polls that we'll be wanting your feedback on, and we'll be talking through the results of those throughout the presentation at the start. So yeah, just a bit of interactivity with you guys. And then we'll also be sharing the slides and recording afterwards, so you'll get sent that via email following today's webinar. So what to expect today? We are going to start with a brief introduction to WebBuzz, in case you're not familiar with us and what we do. We'll then go into the polls, as I mentioned just previously, to understand how you organise and approach to volunteer surveys. Then I'll hand over to Roger, and he'll then share his screen, his slides and the content for today's presentation. And then, as I mentioned, crucially, we'll have plenty of time at the end to answer your questions. So I don't want to spend too much time today talking about us, but just for those who haven't had the pleasure of working with us yet, just to give you a brief introduction of who WorkBuzz are and why we're talking about volunteer surveys today. So yes, I think next slide, please, Roger. Yes, perfect. We are a versatile and flexible survey platform that you can ask in your bespoke question set to get feedback across your organisation to facilitate your organisation needs and facilitate change, inform decision making, and make sure your people feel heard on issues that matter to your organisation. Our clients use WorkBuzz platform to gather feedback from their people throughout the whole employee lifecycle, from onboarding to exit and all the important moments in between. And this is from the full diagnosis with an engagement survey to bite-sized listening moments and quick pulse checks as well. And all of it included in one platform and one subscription that suits your listening program and works best for your organisation. So yes, we've worked with not-for-profit organisations. So in the UK, this whole of the third sector, so from charities working with children and young people to medical research organisations and everything in between, as well as in the UK, social care providers. Then internationally, we get to work with many humanitarian and development organisations in the INGO space. As well as international government organisations and those in the UN system and EU bodies too. And as you're here to discuss volunteer engagement specifically today, we thought we'd share a few of the organisations we've worked with as well. So yes, our clients, which now include over 50 not-for-profit organisations, are already seeing this better together proposition play out for their employee listening programme and benefiting from the joined up offer of WorkBuzz and the solutions we provide. So in terms of what this looks like, access to the WorkBuzz platform is paired with a personalised survey experience with ongoing support and guidance from a dedicated team. This means advice on survey rhythm and question design, enabling you to gather feedback on bespoke topics. Our clients use WorkBuzz to run surveys throughout the whole employee volunteer lifecycle. Essentially, however you design your employee listening programme, the platform is there to facilitate that. And crucially, we are there to help organisations to really understand their survey results, how they differ across the organisation, and crucially, how they compare to other very similar organisations across the sector. This is all supported by the platform itself, which is built quickly and easily launch unlimited surveys. It helps to reach every employee and volunteer, whether they're on a charity shop floor or in a field delivering aid. And it's all about facilitating action and improving working lives, right? So WorkBuzz also includes AI-powered action planning tool for leaders and managers to drive meaningful action, which is what an employee listening program is there to do. So I think without further ado, I think we'll get into some of the polls. So yeah, this is some of the features that we do offer. We have the people science AI summaries, as well as perspectives, and action planning, and onboard and exit surveys, as I've just mentioned. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll just jump in here, if I may, and just
Yeah, go
do
for
a
it.
couple of slides, and then we'll be very interested to hear your own thoughts in the polls. Thank you so much, Sarah, for doing this with me. Um, so a little bit of context. I think one of the headlines that we're probably all aware of is that formal volunteering in the UK has dropped since pre-pandemic levels by about 4 million people. About 8 million people, or 16% of people, volunteered at least once a month for an organization or a club or a group, down from about 12 million pre-pandemic. So that's a notable change. I think maybe some indications that's beginning to pick up. It's about 1% of GDP in terms of valuing that time. Some of the key reasons for people volunteering about wanting to help people, with often a connection to the cause and having time that they're willing to spend. Also, barriers around people who are not wishing to make an ongoing commitment at this stage, do other things with their spare time, or have indeed other work or study commitments. So, a bit of work there. And this is all from NCVO's Civil Society Almanac. It's a 2024 version. I think the 25 version has yet come out, but when it comes out, probably quite soon, it'll be interesting to see the update this. Another finding that those in deprived communities are slightly less likely to volunteer. I think what NCVO says is that it continues to be a really important aspect of community life, as we all know, and we're going to be asking you about the impact of volunteers in your own organisations. But there are plenty of challenges which, if we can address, will really enable us to thrive and support. So a little bit of context there. And in some ways, I think where that sort of context takes you and your organizations is perhaps to have a think a bit about some of these questions. You'll find that some questions work for you, some perhaps don't quite work for you. But how important are your volunteers? What would be the impact of involving fewer or indeed more? What's a business case for involving volunteers? Is there a business case? Have you thought that through? Do you have enough for diversity? What about recruitment and retention? And what are the challenges you face? Do you understand volunteers and their experience and whether it meets their expectations? Are you able to help and enable your volunteers to maximize their contribution? Do you have a sense of where things are working well and less well? And do you have a plan for enhancing your volunteers' experience? So those, I think, are some broad questions that we'd like to encourage you to think about. But now let's, as Sarah mentioned, let's go into the polls, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on three questions that we've got.
Brilliant. Thank you, Roger. So I will launch the first poll. Um, there we go. So we'll give that a minute just to get your responses to come through. A few more seconds. Okay, I will end the poll there and share the results. So, Roger, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think 7 out of 10 of you would like a few more volunteers. Only very few. One of the 17 of you feel you have all the volunteers you need. Well done. That's impressive. And then about a quarter would like many more volunteers. Feel you're sort of further a bit short, really, in terms of volunteers. So thank you so much for that. It's really helpful context. what we'll do with the results is we'll incorporate those into the slides that we send out to you.
Yeah.
So you're welcome to jot anything down as we go through, but just to reassure you that obviously anonymously, we will be including those responses in the updated slides that we sent out to you.
Brilliant. And then the next one is we'd like you to answer this in the chat box. So we've got a question for you, which is what are the recruitment and retention challenges you face? So use the chat box to put your answers in, and then we'll go through those. So I'll just again give you a minute to think and to add your answers in there. Okay, got a couple coming through now. Looking good. So yeah, I'll start sort of going through these now, Roger. So we've got finding the people that meet specific role or criteria. And then I'm from a students' union. The main issue is getting students to engage with the role and talk to us about what they're doing. We retain ours, but when they leave, we find it hard to replace them. My students struggle with the amount of paperwork, DBS checks, safeguarding, etc., when starting the role with a charity. Recruiting for specialised opportunities that only interest a few people, individuals. People are interested but don't seem to be active, proactive when engaged. Catching the attention of the right volunteers can offer the right level of commitment, making sure that volunteers feel their contribution is valued and not overburdened, and gathering sufficient feedback from them to make change to retain them. And then finally, lifestyle changes, particularly since COVID as well. So I think pandemic's been a factor there.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. A range of really good challenges, but also thank you for those of you sharing some of your solutions. Um, a good range there. One of them, obviously, specialized roles where you have particular requirements of people, and which can be harder than perhaps some of the more generic roles. Engaging students, some of the administration for those of you who need to do DBS checks or go through other processes, obviously can slow things down and be a little bit of a barrier. Good to hear that some of you are gathering feedback and wanting to enhance the employee experience. It's interesting the point about lifestyle changes in the pandemic. Maybe perhaps some links there to some of the stats that I shared earlier. I guess takes us then into other ways in which we can adapt our volunteer roles we create to relate to some of those lifestyle preferences or lifestyle changes. So thank you very much indeed.
Brilliant. And then the final question, final poll question that we have for you guys is what are your plans for enhancing volunteer experience over the next 12 months? And again, we'd like you to use the chat box to pop those in. Be really interesting to hear some of your thoughts on that. Okay, got a couple coming through now. So I'll start going through these. So making specific volunteer awards and pushing the transferable skills for future employment. Um, Rolling out national social coffee afternoon get-togethers for volunteers. We have launched a new volunteer platform in our county hope this will become a one-stop shop for volunteers. Apply once, but can attach to multiple organisations if they wish. Volunteer recognition, more recognition. We have a volunteer lunch. That's quite interesting. Hopefully, convincing administration to give the green light for volunteer management software instead of managing software volunteers through manual means. Interesting as well. Thank you for those contributions.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. A few themes there, sort of recognition and awards. I think a mixture of lunch and coffee for
Yes.
get-togethers, bringing the social element to the piece. And I know we were also talking about platforms, which is so relevant. Have we got the data at our fingertips to be able to, which is reasonably up to date, and we have the right processes. So important of managing sort of anything with any scale these days. Really good to hear that a number of you are pressing forward in that,
A couple
so
of
that you can reach people. Yeah, go
other
for it.
interesting ones that have just come through, Roger. So we've got a buddy scheme to link new and existing volunteers to help upskill and have a community feel. And then also within a students' union context, making more of an effort to speak about volunteering as a whole and have dedicated staff members to oversee volunteer experience. So a couple of additional ones there.
Yeah, very good. Love the buddy scheme, helping people get up to speed. Many organisations use that for staff. Really good to see that. And Students' Union, well, this is fantastic for the rest of us in the sector. Great to hear about your Students' Union, but you can get students volunteering. Perhaps we'll get them volunteering for the rest of their careers and the rest of their lives. So very strategic there. Thank you very much indeed. Very good. So let me um, go through a few slides. And as Sarah said, we're really keen to have your Q&A. We've got some great questions coming up, so let me share a few thoughts, but then really keen to hear your inputs too. I guess our question is a survey possible part of your way forward? And I think our overall sense is there are a number of advantages from taking some form of survey approach. I think it's hard to understand experience without some sort of systematic research. Obviously, you can do focus groups, you can do one-to-ones and so forth, but it's hard to get the scale across the volunteers as a whole without some form of survey. And I think without some form of listening, it's hard to create a credible way forward. I mean, you can create a way forward, but what's it based on? I think also a survey can be a safe space. People can provide you are clear about your confidentiality approach and how that plays out, and that people know that when they take the survey, they can't be traced. Nobody's going to see their individual results. It can be a safe space for people to be honest, to give feedback, and that's absolutely what you want. I think you can begin to understand time commitment. You may have data on that. But you will find, I'm sure, that there is a sort of 80-20 rule, those sorts of things, where you have 20% of volunteers doing the most amount of time for you per week, per month, and so forth, and probably providing about 80% of your volunteer effort if you add it up in terms of time, which is only obviously one approach. But have a think a bit about how that plays out in terms of time, and also understand a bit more about your diversity. You may capture that when volunteers join, but there may be other aspects you want to capture too. I think when you're thinking of a survey, you might want to think of it as part of a wider review. Doesn't just have to be a survey. Think wider. Help use it as a diagnostic tool to contribute to establishing priorities, gather evidence for change, and also track change. So many of our clients will repeat their surveys every year or two, and then be able to see whether the needle has moved on the key areas that they wanted to focus on. Okay, so that's sort of surveys in general. As you'll begin to think about it for your own organization, I think a few perhaps key questions to think about. Firstly, just set it in your context. What are your current challenges, your priorities, your hot topics? Thank you for telling us about those. Thank you for telling us about whether you feel you have sufficient volunteers or whether you need some more or many more. I think, from that can drive what do you want to learn? What do you want the survey to help you understand, to help you address some of those challenges? I mean, that's, I think, very much the driver there. Who do you wish to hear from? Maybe perhaps an obvious question. Maybe your answer is all volunteers, and maybe that's absolutely fine. Some of our clients do that. But you might want to segment. You might want to say, well, we have some volunteers who do come once a year on the London Marathon. You know, maybe we'll have something for them, but perhaps not to involve them in quite the same way because they're not so invested. They're not putting so much time in. They're not so much part of the culture that the volunteers who are working with you every week or every month are. So do have a think a bit about who and if there are lines to be drawn where you draw them. I think there's an interesting question that we'll explore on this slide and the next slide as well, which is how do you see employee surveys? As I'm sure you know, employee surveys, employee engagement surveys are well established and most organizations run them. If you're thinking about a volunteer survey, do you want to think of them quite closely connected? Many of our clients talk about a people survey. They survey their employees, they survey their volunteers. And if you wanted to take a sort of coordinated approach, you might want to consider some of the questions you ask your employees asking for volunteers and vice versa. There'll definitely be some different questions as well. But do you want to sort of see them within a same sort of frame? If you want to benchmark your results, we can help you with that. Others, I'm sure, can do that too. And do you want to sort of run a larger survey, a full survey, perhaps 40, 60, 40 to 50 questions, or a focused, more narrow sort of pulse survey on one or two topics and a sort of deep dive? So there's some questions. Just pushing this question of the links to an employee survey. Our clients are basically fairly evenly split between those who run the employee and volunteer survey at the same time and those who run separately. Those who do it at the same time sort of like to think they're taking a holistic approach to their people, that they are communicating to that volunteers are just as important as employees. It gives you perhaps the opportunity to explore some common themes and how do employees experience some of those common themes and how do volunteers and do some contrasting. And may sometimes be more cost effective. There could be some joint communications, um, some shared messaging, some shared resources as you get the messaging out to your employees and volunteers. Some, however, run separately. They like to keep a focus on volunteers rather than they like to choose timing that works for volunteers. Many organizations, there's a reasonable amount of seasonality with volunteers. Not all, but some do, where you have particular points in the year when more volunteers are involved, perhaps choose that timing which works for those. And also perhaps the advantage of running separately can be that volunteer survey results, really get the management attention rather than perhaps when you're doing it together, perhaps a danger that some leadership teams might just focus on the employees and um, just give a nod on the volunteer side. So have a think about how that plays out. Talk to your colleagues in HR who look after your employee engagement and have a think about what approach is going to work best for you. A few slides I'll run through fairly swiftly. I think we all know the typical stages of a survey. There's our design, the field work, the reporting, and then crucially, the action planning and implementing change. And as you're thinking about your survey, do see it as those four steps, not just running the survey, but it's all about the end is about making the change. So just a few thoughts here on that. Communication is absolutely key throughout the whole journey. Start your communication early. If you've got comm specialists in your organization, be to part of their door, get them helping you, creating some resources. Do think about what your messages are. Questions like, why should I undertake this survey? You need a good answer to that question a volunteer might ask. You might want to think about the answer to the question, well, what are we going to do with the results? Well, we see the results. So have a think about really clear messaging on the key questions. Leadership, visible support from leadership is always good. Use managers too. Use your channels. Hopefully you'll have a number of channels, whether that's newsletters, whether that's email, whether it's particular meetings or groups or opportunities for getting people together. Do send reminders out And then don't give up on the communication once you've just got the data in. Keep the communication going throughout the process so people can see what's happening and how they can be involved. In terms of scope, there's a big range of potential topics you might want to include. This is just a sort of high level listing. Some of those ones around diversity, inclusion, health and well-being, and respectful workplace, perhaps more recent. But the scope is broad potentially. The danger with that is you end up asking too many questions. So where that takes you is to being really clear about what you see the key challenges that you're facing and deciding your scope in relation to that. Many of our clients, most of our clients like to create a sort of volunteer engagement index. So sort of one or two questions, which can be a sort of useful KPI um, to get out, where often you can report that at team or board level, keep visibility high. Many of our clients use I would recommend this organization as a good place to volunteer. Certainly others like to include some other key questions that reflect their volunteer engagement plan and strategy. But it's really good to have an engagement index. And then once you've established it, then keep it exactly the same so you can track. Oh, last year we were 82. Really pleasing that this year we've gone up to 86 and feed that back so everybody knows the metric is collected and defined in the same way. You'll want to break the results down by organizational demographics, regions, locations, counties, towns, through the geography of it, through your roles. You'll want to understand typical hours, how many hours a month they're putting in, they're committing, how often, how long they've been involved. And then also some personal demographics are often useful. These are some common ones. There's no obligation to use them all, but if you're taking your diversity and inclusion agenda seriously, you'll want to include some of these key questions so that you can understand the extent to which the volunteer experience is the same between, say, men and women, or between people from different ethnicities, or whether there's substantial differences. Because if there are substantial differences, you'll probably want to know and to think about that as an issue to work on. Open questions, really helpful. What's the best thing about working for volunteering for the organization? If you could change one thing about volunteering, what would it be? I think with AI these days, making the analysis of these sorts of questions much easier. Typically, we'll come on to the analysis in a moment, but it makes it easier. Uh, don't be frightened about asking some specific questions as well. If you've, for example, launched a new platform, as some of you have done or are doing, you might want to say, how are you finding the new platform if there's a volunteer impact there. So open questions can really be helpful to dig underneath and understand what volunteers are saying. Field work, when the survey's open, you'll obviously want to think about the timing. Often with volunteer surveys, we would say 3 to 6 weeks, a bit longer than employees. Employees tends to be more like 2, 3, or maximum 4 weeks. But with volunteers, particularly those who are involved less often, perhaps once or twice a month, you will want to keep it open a bit longer. Have a good think about your barriers to completion are. Are people on email? Where not? Could you use some QR codes or some kiosk codes for those who are not on email? Get people to do it on their phone, make it really easy for them. Think about confidentiality and communicate that. And then within the fieldwork period, to track your response rates and follow up with managers as appropriate. Response rates for volunteer surveys are generally lower than for employee surveys. So don't beat yourself up if you are getting lower response rates. This is a scatter plot of a number of volunteer surveys we've run with the response rate on the vertical axis and the number of volunteers on the horizontal axis. Obviously, it's a good range, but you can see that there's a downward trend. Overall, within that group, at 22% would be common. For those with less than 1,000 volunteers, it's more like 37. between 1 and 5,000 volunteers, 18, 5,000 plus 10. Those are just some data that we have. Many organizations will wish to and will achieve higher than that. So you'll then close the survey, start doing your analysis. As we've said, analyze your results, by role, by department, by demographics. Heat maps can be a really powerful way. You could do this in Excel super easily, as I expect most of you know, or in your survey platform. Analyze your open questions. Um, this is an example, perhaps, of taking our open questions and identifying the key themes. Um, Focus, generally speaking, on your top 4 or 5 themes. Don't stress about every single comment that is made, but look at those where there's commonality, where a number of people are talking about the same thing, and you'll probably want to distill each of these themes out a bit more, which you can do. As I mentioned, AI can be a super useful tool for this, but obviously to stick with your own organization's guardrails to make sure that any data you do analyze stays within your organizational boundary and doesn't start leaking out into other parts of the world, the internet. Okay, so what does analysis and conclusions look like? On the left, we've just got a few bullet points as the things you should do compared to previous, if you've got a previous survey, to Excel benchmarks. Analyze it by directorate, look at engagement and look at the key drivers of engagement, look at those questions which have a high correlation and do a thematic analysis. And where is that taking you? I think that is taking you broadly to answering 6 questions. Overall, what's working well and what's less well? I think that's a really important one. How does it vary? Are there particular groups of volunteers who need particular attention? Whether that's in particular locations, whether that's in particular demographics. What are the key messages from the open questions? Overall, as you begin to do that analysis, pinpoint what you see as the key areas to celebrate, what your key areas to explore, and start thinking through what the overall messages are and what your main priorities are. So don't be paralyzed. Don't be experience paralysis through analysis, but make sure you work with colleagues to answer those questions and to get to the key points. Really important. We've got a guide on action planning, which is coming out very soon, and we run webinars on action planning. I'm not going to go through this in any detail, but there's some good resources here for you to help think about action planning. In some ways, the top sort of 1 to 6 are some of the key steps to take. Look at your results, publish your results, decide your priorities, build your action plans, and then drive change. And that can be supported by a number of strategies, 7 to 12, which is building your capability, driving timescales, getting leadership buy-in, building your manager capability, communication, strategy, and alignment. And also number 12, really helpful to identify perhaps your engagement index as a sort of organization-wide KPI that you can include in your organization's overall KPIs or scorecard. As I said, we have a guide on impactful volunteer surveys, which is coming out in the next few weeks, coming out quite soon. We'll be letting you have that as soon as it's ready. And that will be a useful resource. I wanted to simply do end by just taking you through a case study, a client of ours who we thought really took a very thoughtful approach, and we were really proud to partner with them. They are obviously anonymous. They're a national organisation, been running volunteering since 2010. They involve about 3,000 volunteers and 4 different roles. They're quite complex. They survey every couple of years, and they have a volunteering team of 3. A key thing, as you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, they see surveys as part of a monitoring and evaluation cycle. It's not a sort of one-off activity. It's something they do. They gather data, they drive insight, they make plans, they take action, they monitor it, and it's an ongoing process. So do map out your own cycle and how you see this. They set out some aims for the survey, which were all about understanding and improving the experience. That was the heart of it. That was the acid test. And then specifically looking at some changes, had things improved. How could they use their team's resource the best? It's a small team, only 3 people in the central volunteering team. I mean, perhaps some of you may think that's small, some of you may think that's very well resourced. But whatever, it's always key to sort of say, are we using our time most effectively? Where where should we put more time or indeed less time? To understand some of the national challenges and local challenges, usually in these surveys, there are usually some national themes coming out, but there's also a variety of different local situations, and you'll want to distinguish these two and treat them slightly differently because the solutions will be different. And they wanted, above all, to contribute to their strategy. A few facts and figures. They got a 44% response rate, which was above the numbers I shared with you before. I think they're one of the dots on that graph. So that was good. They really went for it in terms of communication. They did really detailed analysis. We provided them with a dashboard and platform. They read the question results. They did all the right things. They ran focus groups with volunteers to understand challenges better. I think that can be very helpful after a survey. After a survey, you may well be getting a whole bunch of feedback on a few themes and think, okay, well, that's great. But actually, we need to understand that and just go a bit underneath it. So focus groups can be very helpful to sort of get a more of a deep dive and perhaps also to start identifying what the solutions would be. And then they reported on that. And they then um, uh, took the results and shared them with different audiences. There are indeed a range of different audiences, maybe your volunteering team, your senior management or senior leadership team, volunteers as a whole, managers, a range of different stakeholders who are all going to be interested in the survey results. They supported discussions with teams and departments and helped provide managers with resources and toolkits to be able to have that discussion with their volunteers. Thought about quick wins. Quick wins, it's always nice to get them done, ticked, meaning you get some momentum going on the action. They also put together a national action plan for the longer term issues, the ones that were going to take a few months. And they also, number 7, I thought it's interesting, had one-to-ones with the lower scoring volunteer programs, where you'll probably find there are 1 or 2 parts of your organization where the volunteer experience is a bit different, it's a bit lower. Well, what's happening there? Why is that not a consistent experience? Are there particular things? You may well know what's going on, but good to really sort of get underneath that and treat that as somewhere an action to take. On the right-hand side, we just had some of their sort of broad themes, areas to celebrate, areas for improvement in some ways. But coming up with something simple like that is really helpful as you analyze your results. And then finally, their lessons learnt, which I thought was really nice. Really be clear what your purpose is. Theirs was to understand and improve the volunteer experience. Be inclusive, try and involve as many volunteers as you can. Well, they involved nearly half, which is pretty good, actually, given the normal rates. Be smart when devising the survey. What does that mean? Don't ask too many questions. Really ask the questions that are right for you in your context. None of these things just happen. They do require quite a bit of work and see through. So step up, be supportive, curious. I think transparency is all about communication. So keep the communication up throughout. See communication is really crucial. Be seen to be making change. Again, that links to the communication point. Be clear on the actions you've taken. Don't just do good work, but tell people you've done it. And be open about priorities and limitations. There may be some feedback you get from volunteers you simply cannot action. It's just not possible. Be honest about that. It's much better to be honest than to promise something you know you are not going to be able to deliver. So that was a quick case study. Thank you very much indeed for listening. Let's now get into the Q&A. Sarah, over
Y-
to you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Roger. It was really interesting. And I'm sure some useful bits and pieces there for everyone attending and whoever's watching on demand will be able to sort of utilize and take away from the session. So yes, we had a few questions that were submitted prior to today's session, so we're going to go through those first. But as I said at the start, if you do have any questions, please do put them in the chat and we'll get to those as well. So yeah, Roger, first question is, let me go back here. Okay, yeah, is from Shanti, and Shanti's asked to encourage the participation to feedback, increase the number of feedback completed. So I think they want some advice there about how to increase and encourage participants to feedback.
Great question. I talked about it a little bit in the session, Shantu, so I hope that was helpful. In summary, I think communication is essential, but probably not sufficient. You also, I think, need to think about the mechanics. How will you actually get volunteers to do it? Do you have their email addresses? How many will do it on email? Would it be better if you have a QR code, for example, if your
Mhm.
volunteers are working in a particular location, would like to do it on their phones and so forth. So have a good think about the communication so people understand it, and then also think carefully about your mechanics. If you're not quite sure what the solutions might be, you might want to get a group of volunteers to partner up with you to contribute. Having champions can also be helpful. So you're hearing that people are hearing the message, not just from you. So use a range of different strategies. Once you launch the survey, keep sending reminders out, perhaps every week. Give enough time for people to take the survey. For those who come in perhaps once a month, a 3 week time frame might be too short. They might not be involved and touching your organization for them. So a range of different sort of communication and practical steps. And my experience has been that if you get a group of volunteers round, they'll help you think it through for the different types of volunteers you have. Thank you.
Brilliant. The next question is from Guinevere, and Guinevere's asked, what are the best tools for data visualization and what file formats are compatible with these tools?
Nice question, Guinevere. Thank you for that. And yes, look, data visualization is important, isn't it? I shared an example of a couple of heat maps. I think visualization helps the audiences you want to influence to get the message quite easily and quickly and get what the data is saying. So data visualization is really important. If you have a survey platform, it will probably come with some form of data visualization. Certainly at WorkBuzz, our platform does as well. If you want to do it outside a platform, we do actually run a webinar on data visualization. So in preparation for this, I did have a quick look at what we were saying. Excel's obviously a great tool. You can run heat maps in Excel very easily. PowerPoint too. Canva is a tool that we have used quite a bit at WorkBuzz. Power BI and Tableau can be useful. I think Power BI, which is a Microsoft product, obviously is, I think, gaining more traction these days, but it can be a very powerful tool for data visualization. Get your data into Power BI. Pictochart is another tool certainly we've used over the years. So those are some of the things for us. If others have suggestions on data visualization tools and want to put them in the chat, we'll make sure we include those. But those are a few thoughts on tools. I think you should find that most file formats will be compatible. I can't give you chapter and verse on exactly which file format is compatible, but I'd be surprised if most can't work. And you should be able to get your survey results in whatever platform you've used out into forms that can work with those other tools if appropriate.
Brilliant. Lara has then asked, working in a hybrid environment, how can a small team still have a culture in the office that is collaborative, supportive, and rewarding?
Okay, Laura, thank you for the question. I wasn't quite sure whether your question was about employees or volunteers, but let's just assume it was about volunteers because I think that's obviously what this webinar is about. I mean, look, hybrid environment means that people are in the office sometimes, sometimes working from home, obviously. I think that the answer, Lara, is in how you get people together and what happens when you do get people together. We talked about that a little bit in terms of enhancing volunteer experiences. People talking about get-togethers, lunches, coffees, those sorts of things. I think it's also how you use meetings. Meetings are an important part of organizational life. You'll want to make sure that they are useful, don't go on too long, are quite helpful, fun, informative, where people can contribute as well and not just sitting there listening to somebody um, boring on. So use meetings effectively when you get people together, make them interesting, and also, consider whether other get-togethers, away days, lunches, social things can also be helpful. And of course, a classic approach is to ask people, how can we create a good culture? Do we have a good culture? Um, you will find some people, some volunteers want to be quite sociable and want to socialize with others. Others perhaps don't. They want to volunteer to come in to do the volunteering, but may not wish to be necessarily meeting lots of new people and so forth. So you'll find there will be some variation there. But creating a good culture with your volunteers is absolutely crucial. Volunteers want to be part of something that's bigger than them. They want to be able to do what they do and know that that's impactful and that it connects with others. So creating that culture where people can learn, share, talk about issues and problems, solve problems together is absolutely crucial. Yeah, good luck in terms of taking that forward. That's a really important area.
Amazing. Um, Charlie has then asked, what successful approaches are there for volunteers that may differ to employees for improving response rates and to engagement surveys?
Nice question, Charlie. Really good one. I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. I think number one, often keep your field work a bit longer. Um, don't go on too long. You'll kind of know when the response rates start dropping off, but we certainly see up to 6 weeks can be needed. Um, I think also crucially have a think about access. Many organizations will have, not all, but many organizations may have all their employees on email, and therefore reminders which essentially go out on email are easy to send and will do the job. Many of your volunteers may not be on email, and you'll want to think about how you reach them and where you reach them. Do you send emails to their personal email address? Do you get QR codes or kiosk codes to where they are volunteering? Um, if you possibly can avoid paper questionnaires, we'd encourage you to avoid the dreaded paper questionnaire. I say the dreaded paper questionnaire because some organizations still attempted to try to think about using them. We always try to discourage it because somebody fills it in, and there are so many barriers to it actually ending up in the right place for somebody to do the data entry. So try and encourage people to like employee surveys, um, to do it electronically, but think hard about how you reach people, whether they are, for example, if they're working in a volunteer in a shop, whether you provide access on an iPad in the shop or PC in the shop, whether you are using QR codes or whatever method. So think about where your volunteers are, how they can access technology, whether it's their phones, whether it's technology you're providing in the organization. Those are some of the main differences. And I guess also links will to platform a bit. Some of you are putting in these platforms and hopefully will have a really good database of your current volunteers. But if you haven't quite got that, then do really think about refreshing your volunteer database so you've got a complete list and you're up to date. Usually on the employee side, that bit is already served, not least for payroll reasons, which obviously is an important requirement. So do make sure your volunteer data is also up to date.
Yeah, brilliant. I think some of the stuff there, Roger, that you answered there for Charlie's question might actually also help to answer another question, which is from Darren, which was how to maximize the impact and maximize uptake. I don't know if you've got anything else to add to addition on that one.
Yeah, no, thanks, Darren. And there's also another one, Sarah, which we can link to from George Llewellyn, effective
Yes.
management of feedback and closing the feedback loop. So I think I've talked a bit about maximizing the feedback, the fieldwork stage. I think in terms of maximizing the impact, that's a great question, Darren. That's what it's all about, actually. The survey isn't over when the survey's done. The survey's over when action has been implemented. So I think what we're saying here is do some of those things that we've highlighted in that case study organization. Really think through the results. Think about what's happening nationally or organization wide, perhaps might be another phrase you might use, and what's happening more locally, or perhaps you might think role by role, team by team. Um, Ensure you get your senior management team involved. If they are supportive of the way forward, that can make a massive difference. If the senior management team is lukewarm or not bothered, then that definitely constrains and doesn't help. Um, Communicate, be upfront with the results. Thank volunteers for their input. Tell them what the plans and priorities are. Give them opportunities to be involved, but see it as an ongoing process. And I think, Jojilen, your point about closing the feedback loop is also covered there. I tell people what the results are, tell people what you're going to do about it and how they can be involved. So yeah, the impact is really crucial. Yes, the survey is good, but it's driving the impact and making the change, which is always the harder part of any survey initiative, and where one needs to quote the case study organization, and let me just quote them: "Be steadfast and put the work in." Be determined and diligent. That's the way to get the impact. I really like the fact that they went and saw the volunteer groups with much lower rates, and they went and tried to understand what was going on there. That takes time to arrange that, identify that, and really think it through. But if you put the work in, you will maximize your impact, and that's all about improving the volunteer experience, but and also crucially making sure that the small volunteering team that you have is spending its time in the most effective way.
Brilliant. So yeah, that's all the pre-asked questions that we had. I think that I've just looked at the chat. There doesn't seem to be any other questions that have come through. One thing I would like to add is on some of the pre-asked questions, there were some questions that came through regarding employee surveys. We do actually have a lot of resources, and as Roger mentioned previously, there's previous webinars that we've hosted on these sort of topics, which are all available on demand through our website. So I have literally just posted into the chat a link to where those webinars are. So you can have a look at those and obviously get the answers to those questions. And then I've also little popped into a link for our just a little bit of a feedback from today and from the webinar, how you found it. It'd be really good to hear from you about sort of your thoughts on today's session. So yeah, there's, as Roger had, there was a QR code on the screen just there, if you'd like to sort of give us some feedback. And as I mentioned, I think on the next slide, Roger, there's webinars. We've got a couple upcoming. So the end towards the end of this month. So we have boost your response rate, successful communication for promoting engagement surveys, and engaging dispersed workforces, understanding culture in not-for-profit organisations. So yes, we will be sending this deck out, so you'll be able to click on the links there, but they're also on the webinar page that I've just posted in the chat as well. Uh, yeah. Next slide, please, Roger. So yeah, that's us, and thank you for attending today. It's been really interesting, really insightful, and I hope you've been able to take something away from today's session. And yeah, Roger, any closing remarks from yourself?
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and thank you for your questions. Always really stimulating to have your questions. Hope you find it useful. These are our contact points. We'd be delighted to connect with you if you'd like to discuss any questions in a bit more detail or particular questions in relation to your own project. We're always happy to have a chat. Good luck in terms of taking our volunteer survey forward, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Brilliant. Take care, everyone, and see you soon.